Welcome to Helpful Conversations brought to you by Robbie's Hope Foundation. I am your host, Kari Eckert. Joining me today is Nina Birdsey, a senior in college at the University of Colorado at Boulder. Nina will graduate in May with a degree in psychology and a certificate in public health. Nina is planning on taking a gap year, then pursuing an accelerated nursing program to get a BSN. Nina is one of the OGs of Robbie's Hope, joining us immediately after our founding in the fall of 2018. Welcome, Nina.
Hi, Kari. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Nina, you have been working with Robbie's Hope since its founding in the fall of 2018. Can you share your personal journey or a personal experience that was the catalyst to your involvement with Robbie's Hope?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I knew Robbie to begin with. And I also have some other friends that I know have struggled with mental health. And I did have a friend who actually attempted to take their own life before Robbie took his. And so that really affected me, and wanting to make sure that I could do anything in my power to make another person know that they're not alone, and that some of the feelings they have are valid and not just kind of isolated to them, that there are other people out there who have difficulties and you don't have to struggle alone. And I think especially for boys, I can only imagine, a society tells them so much about, your feelings are anger and that is it. You don't get to be sad or down or feel any other thing but anger. And so I think that it's been really damaging to this generation of people who are also kind of trying to open up and be more aware and conscious of how they affect other people as well as how others affect them. And so I felt it was really important for me to get involved in any way I could. And so I remember our interview, and remember, getting to start with Seitaro and getting into it, and at your old house in the basement, and starting at the kitchen table and going over things, and just seeing, how we could make this a possibility. And I'm just so proud you and Jason and all of the interns who have come after me have really just made this flourish.
You've been a part of that. Can you remind me and our listeners how you knew Robbie?
Yeah, so I went to Lakewood High School, and I know Robbie also was a swimmer and a tennis player at Rolling Hills Country Club. And my great grandmother was also a member there, so I had seen him a bunch of times. I was also good friends with Sabrina Baker and people who knew Robbie. And then in high school, he was 1 year younger than me, and I remember actually one of the high school dances. We got to dance together, which was very fun. So, we weren't really close, but I definitely knew him and he knew of me, and we were always friendly. And he was just such a sweet, kind young gentleman.
Awesome. Awesome. I did not know that dance story at homecoming. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. So I remember in January of 2019 that Jason and I asked you to be a part of the HOPEfull Drive. What do you remember about that experience?
Yeah, so that was I know that was really a couple years ago now, throwing it back 5 years. But yeah, I remember just the start with Chris and Abby, and remind me again, who else was there? Chris, Abby, and what was
Lizzie,
it?
there was a lot of
Lizzie.
kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I remember at the very beginning, it was kind of just figuring out our game plan of how we wanted to start, how we wanted to reach people, what we wanted to achieve. And we started with kind of this idea of, let's spend 3 weeks and we will make cans and we will decorate them.
What's a
And
can?
a can is a big bucket for collecting donations that has a little slit in the middle so you can actually accept coins or cash, or checks if people are writing them. I don't think they would, but if they still are. And then we would decorate them and walk around with them. So we could, and almost as if it was a conversation starter, we could discuss what was going on, what we were doing, and also had other information on there, like our website or other things that could help identify Robbie's Hope and what we were doing out there. So, exactly. So, I remember I remember we would go at Lakewood High School. We had a couple of days doing it. I remember going down to 16th Street and doing that and
What's
having
16th Street for people who don't
yes,
live
of
in
course.
Denver?
Of course. So 16th Street is a mall downtown that is a very kind of busy urban setting where lots of people, a lot of foot traffic. So it was really a wonderful opportunity for us to speak with as many people as possible who were not necessarily in Lakewood. So I would say that's probably a 20-minute drive between Lakewood High School and 17th or 16th Street, excuse me. So I would say most of the people down there probably wouldn't have known what was going on. So it was a really unique opportunity to be able to discuss with people who might not know and also to have some media exposure. We did some interviews with 9 News, which were really wonderful to be able to spread the message even kind of farther and wider and to people who weren't necessarily there physically, but were able to watch, different news clips.
I was wondering if you remember, like, how did you stop somebody walking by in a busy area on a Saturday afternoon? Like, what did you say? How to
Yeah,
get somebody's
absolutely.
attention?
Right. And I remember feeling quite a bit intimidated at first, along with some of the other high school students, just because it's a new location, it's a new situation, and especially because I think when we're in high school, our identity is so kind of tied to who we are in school that it really allowed us to create and explore some other parts of our identities in terms of being able to go up and strike a conversation with someone. So usually what I would do is I'd walk up to somebody and say, "Hi, how are you? Do you have a couple minutes to talk about the Robbie's Hope Foundation, mental health and teen suicide prevention nonprofit?" And so 9 times out of 10 people would say, "Of course I have time," or, I'm so sorry to hear that, and what can I do?" And so I think it was a really helpful icebreaker to be able to talk to someone who we wouldn't be able to normally talk to in a way that was not superiors talking to it, like a teacher talking to a student, or it was kind of almost peers or talking to other people at a different level. And I think that that was really helpful because so many people didn't know about what was going on. And I know they have their own mental health issues or they deal with that because that's just life. Mental health is just always something we will have to deal with. And so I think it must have been really refreshing as well to have, especially older people, see this new generation really be unapologetic about talking about it and asking questions, because that's the important thing, is just being able to talk about it, and so people don't have to feel so lonely and like they're going through it alone. But I would say overall I think the response that we got, especially just from strangers, was positive, and they were interested and curious to know more and about what they could do. And yeah, I think I would hope too that people would follow up and see where the organization is now and how far it's come.
I love that you remember things with such a positive that you said 9 out of 10. If I were to like have to, I would probably say it was 1 out of 10 that was polite and actually gave you a few minutes of their time. So I love that you have the memory that it was bigger, that it was,
Yes.
because there's a
Well,
lot of people that
yeah.
just don't, they just keep walking by and they're going to like have blinders on and pay no attention, take a
Yeah.
route to get away from anybody that's trying to interact with them.
Right, absolutely. And I remember that too, but it was one of those things that's is even if it was that 1 out of 10, it was that one person who was willing to have a conversation, who was willing to listen, that made it all worth it. And that made it, this is the reason why we're doing it, because we know we're making a difference at the end of the day, and it was very validating for someone to stop and take the time and say, thank you for being here and thank you for doing this and having these conversations, especially since they're not easy. This is not an easy or comfortable subject for most people.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you think you grew individually as a young person involved with Robbie's Hope and participating in the Hopeful Drive?
Oh, so much. I I think it opened up a part of me that I didn't even know was possible or there. I've always thought of myself as a responsible person, as someone who's very outgoing, but it also brought in all of these different kind of ideas and the fuel of why I was doing it and the passion behind why I was doing it. And feeling like it was just a no-brainer. This is important. It's going to be difficult sometimes, but and I also think it's been helpful because it really reminded me that nothing is linear in life. And so it's really important to give yourself grace, when you have the ups and downs. And so I remember with, the Hope Drive, it was mostly ups, and then there'd be a couple things, hiccups to deal with, which I think is just typical and to be expected. But at the end of the day, everything was worth it because I knew what was behind it. And, the little things that were difficult, it almost was very empowering because I knew that I could get those little hiccups dealt with. I could overcome them because what was on the other side of it was so much more important to me. So I think it also gave me a lot more confidence too, to be able to make mistakes and try new things and mess up and feel silly without, having like negative self-talk or being like, Nina, you've really messed, instead of just saying like, hey, I know how I'll do it differently next time. And so I think that the Hope Drive was really beneficial, and also trying some new things, and just each way you'd approach someone, you try it a little differently, and just kind of being creative and trying different things and seeing what works best. And also, I think that what works best for one person isn't going to work best for the other person. So also just being able to have honest conversations with people that I don't think that I would have ever had conversations with, much less about, mental health and suicide prevention.
Yeah. How can you explain, do you think, some of the impacts that your involvement, maybe by being an ambassador, an intern, we had the pleasure of having you as an intern at your high school or in the community that you live in, that like I'm sure you felt some of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of my favorite things that happened was actually after I was so sad when I couldn't be an intern anymore, but it was after I was an intern, and I had someone who was younger than me kind of DM me and say, hey, I know you were this wonderful, intern, and you've done so much, and I love the way that you've done A, B, and C, and the way you present yourself in Robbie's Hope. And so they had kind of asked me, how do I go about being an intern? What do you think? And then they were an intern. And so it was so lovely to hear and to see that, my impact and the impact of Robbie's Hope trickled down onto other people. And that because of that, there was interest and there was hope spread to other people to continue this and to continue this message. Um, and I think it was, something that I I I mean, no one saw any of this coming, and I think everyone was in survival mode for a long time, but I think that the way that it has unfolded and the impact, especially on other students that I've found, has been really increasing this generation's ability to have honest conversations with people and to ask for help and to say, I'm not doing okay. And it's okay that I'm not doing okay. But I need to be able to say that. And I need someone to be able to validate that and not say, you need to be okay all the time. And so I think that having your peers, especially because, and I think with the rise of social media, we see people having these lives or these kind of very, kind of
Perfect.
thinned down, exactly, perfect, like idealized versions of themselves. And so it can be very, yeah, I've said validating a lot, but it can be very validating to know that there are other people who are your age who are going through similar things, and that, this is also kind of a collective part of being a human, is acknowledging these things and, you know, dealing with them, whether that's numbing or actually feeling them and letting it sit with you. I think that it's also allowed a conversation too around healthier ways to cope and ways that are beneficial. Whether that's talk therapy, whether that's discussing with your friends, whether that's getting medication, whether that's versus, drinking and using drugs. And I think that it's also hard because there is so much pressure as a high schooler to fit in and to do things and be in whatever scene that, is deemed as socially acceptable or positive. And so I think that it also allowed other high school students to see that our identities are not just strictly tied to school. We have lives outside of that, and our minds and our brains are important, and our body knows at the end of the day, even if we try and ignore it, our body holds what we don't deal with. And so being able to talk with other students who were my age and realizing that all of these other people are going through similar things was incredibly I would say it was very life-changing to just know that other people have these issues and have these experiences, and to feel heard and seen by others. And I think that that's another reason I've loved Robbie's Hope so much, is because people have said, I feel seen now. I feel heard. I feel like I have a place where I can come and talk about things in a non-judgmental way. And I don't have to feel bad about feeling this way.
Yeah. Oh, it makes me so proud just to listen to you talk and all of the experiences and the growth. Looking back 5 years, the impacts that we've been able to allow young people like you just create and experience. So many good memories. Goodness sakes.
Yes, I know. Thank you.
What do you remember about the media stuff that you got to be a part of with Robbie's Hope? Like, how intimidating and scary was that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely remember feeling a bit intimidated the first time. So I think I did 2 or 3 news clips. And the first one I was probably most nervous about. That was in your old house in your basement. And I'm totally blanking on his name, but I think he still works for 9 News, and he was wonderful. But it was actually, I was really proud of myself when I did it. At first it was something that I felt a little uncomfortable, a little intimidated by. And then, it was just having a conversation, and also knowing that, if you make a mistake, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. There's editing for a reason. People are not perfect, but also just have a conversation, be able to
Be
say
real.
exactly, and say what you want to say, because I think in life, there's also so few opportunities to have an audience like that and to be able to say something that's meaningful. And I felt like it was really important to take that opportunity. And yeah, I think that so many people get nervous, including myself. I'm an anxiety girly myself. So it's definitely, it can be stressful, but then I think once you do it, you're like, I'm so glad I did that. That was so worth it. And also then to have, my family see, or other friends see, and then other interns as well, and see like, hey, I know that person. I know them well, and they were able to do it. Why can't I? And so I thought that was also, it was really helpful. And I think
I heard you
empowering to
say
other
I was
students.
proud. I was
Yes.
proud. Like, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah. And
what
then
do you
also on
remember about being
16th
an
Street,
intern?
I think
Like,
9
what
News
kind
also
of,
spoke to us for a
you
little
were one our
while.
first.
And, it was really, it's also helpful too. It's helpful to know that there are people who think that what we're working on is worth time and worth conversations and worth delivering to people. And I thought that was really important as well, because I think, we can only do so much as an individual, so that when it does get to that point where it's collective, and it's collective past even, our small social circles at high school, and being able to kind of, not to the masses, but to the masses, be able to kind of get out these messages, and also what people are saying, what I was saying, what other interns were saying, and to be able to broadcast that to people who, are even less likely to have conversations with us. And even if it doesn't change their mind or completely, it's different. It's like a seed for them to reflect on. And if they don't want to take it, that's on them. But it starts the reflection process. It starts that conversation. And I think that that's half the battle. If we can just acknowledge it, we can start. If we never acknowledge it, how are we going to get any better? How are we going to be able to move in any direction if we can't acknowledge these things that affect every one of us? So I think that being able to have that resource and that tool of media was really essential to the amount of people we were able to reach in the time we were able to reach. I mean, I still to this day am so amazed and proud of all of us for being able to do as fast as we did, and to make this as big as we possibly could and as beneficial to the most amount of people as we possibly could be.
What advice would you give to a 17-year-old in Florida that has heard about Robbie's Hope, but is kind of on the fence, like, oh, I don't know if I could do that. Like, or what would you give, like to your own 17-year-old self? Like, can I be an ambassador for Robbie's Hope? What would that be like?
Yeah. So I think it's one of those things that sometimes you just have to go for it. And that doesn't seem like great advice, but I think that sometimes it's just worth not overthinking it and just trying it. And if you don't love it, you don't have to stick with it. But I think that you realize that you should have done it sooner once you do it, that you would have done it even sooner, because it's, especially for me, I think that if you're passionate about it and if you're on the fence about it, just go for it. What are you going to lose? I think that I'd rather do something and find out I don't love it than always regret never having gotten involved with it. Learning what you don't want or what you do want are equally valid. And so I would just encourage you to take a chance and take a risk. And it's scary. I'm not gonna deny that it can be really scary, and to be vulnerable and to put yourself in a position where, you might make a mistake or you might do great. And so I think that it's important too, because it allows you to have a bigger social circle outside of yourself, right? And especially we have that wonderful map of the US with all of our pins everywhere. And I think it also allows people, from Florida to be able to communicate with people in Colorado or California or Massachusetts. And so because we've really built this kind of national network, I think that it's got to be somewhat more encouraging too, knowing that, there were people in your state who started or who were the first, and you're not alone in it, and that there are other people that you can connect with that are more geographically close to you, but you have all of these other connections that are still valid and important, even if they're farther away. And so I would just encourage a 17-year-old to go for it and to try. And it's not one of those things like, if you don't love it, the world is ending and we're gonna call 9 News back and tell you this person is done. Yes, no, but yeah, I think it's important to try things and explore. And I would also encourage people, if you're feeling nervous, have a friend join you. Become
Yes.
ambassadors together, do it together, or see if if you have a cousin or a sibling or someone who's a similar age. I think that could also be a great way to get involved if you're feeling a little nervous, because you can do it with other people. And especially if you're feeling passionate about it and you're on the fence, I would say it's definitely worth just going for it.
Especially the hopeful drive. It's a lot easier to do
Oh,
things in
absolutely.
numbers. It's hard to do
Right.
stuff solely.
Exactly. And I think also that was a part of the reason that it did succeed as well as it did, is because, it can't be on 5 people. It needs to be on on a collective shared responsibility, because I think also that it's really hard not to burn out, when you're dealing with topics that are really heavy and trauma. And it's important to have a network of other people to share some of that, not just the feelings and emotions that come, but also the work. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of time. And I think that it's important, though, to be able to have a tool, if that's a friend or some other version of a support system within Robbie's Hope. But I also think that overall it is really a support network. And so getting involved, I think, just opens you up to more support and more opportunities and engagement.
Empowerment,
Exactly.
feelings
Yes.
of pleasure, feelings of being proud of yourself. Those go
Yeah.
a
And
long
that you
way.
do make a difference, and that, your voice is important, and that
Yeah.
you do deserve to have a say in what goes on.
So now, as a almost college graduate and pursuing the field of physical health, which will absolutely include mental health, how do you feel like Robbie's Hope has played into your potential career path?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that as it is right now, I really want to go into pediatrics, or pediatric psych nursing. So I think that played most into it because it really, so at the same time that uh, Robbie had passed, I was taking AP psychology. So this was when I first kind of entered the realm of psychology and found it extremely fascinating. But also just that there's so much information that is unknown and also untrue that we receive about our health and our minds, and what it is that we quote unquote need to do or expected to do. And so I think that being able to acknowledge that everyone has mental health, whether it's suffering or it's flourishing and healthy, it's also something that's not linear. It is never linear, because life is not linear, and it just becomes about coping and being able to use methods that are beneficial and not harmful to yourself or others. Um, but I think overall it impacted and really piqued my interest, because I think that it's important, especially, to have conversations with people who seem like they're doing fine, who seem like they are happy. And, I think that it is important, especially as a provider, to be able to say, hey, how's school? How's your home life? How are your friends? How are you? And do you need help with this? Is there something that you feel like is only happening to you? Is there something that's isolating you that feels like, and just trying to kind of open someone up to be able to have conversations and be able to feel like they're heard. Because I think that 9 times out of 10 too, it's just the listening. It's just the being there, listening, and then validating those feelings before you even need to say, you need medication or you need to do this. I think it's just a really important step to start and say, those are valid feelings, and you're not the only one who feels that way. And so I think that I really want to get into nursing and psych nursing, because I think that people just need to have someone they can have a conversation with. And I also think that it can be intimidating to have a conversation, especially if you're more of a private person, about, depression or anxiety, or, maybe you're bipolar or on the autism spectrum, or there's so many different things that can impact the way we want to speak with other people, and also what we are willing to share with them. And I think that it's difficult, because sometimes clinical providers can be more intimidating, but I think that if you go into it in a way of curiosity and wanting to learn and wanting to do better and tailoring it to them specifically and listening to them as an individual, as opposed to kind of pathologizing them, I think that it's also really important to just humanize patients and humanize the experience of going to a therapist or the doctor, especially because it's scary. A lot of times it's work. It takes work to be vulnerable. It's exhausting sometimes to put in the time and deal with things. But I think that, and I've known from my therapist, she's made such a difference in my life, and the way that I've been able to look at situations and deal with situations, and also finding that a lot of the feelings of, validation and support that I need actually come from myself first. And then it comes from other people after. But I think that was something that I really struggled with, was seeking out external validation, and other people are kind of what determine my worth. And so I think that it's important to be able to discuss with students and with children, and have those conversations about, how we feel, and also being able to name things like that. I mean, that's the other thing, is just being able to name how we're feeling, or saying we're overwhelmed, or, and asking for help. It all is really, and kind of encouraged and pushed me to be in some sort of a setting where I can help people and listen to people and set them up with resources and support that can allow them to flourish and to succeed, and feel like they are loved and someone cares about them, and that they're supported, and that they're allowed to make mistakes and try new things. And I think life is just scary, especially as a high schooler, and especially as someone who is growing up during the pandemic. And there's so many things that are happening collectively, and so much collective trauma. And also, I think also just, it's really difficult to be growing up right now. And so
it's difficult to be a parent right now, let alone,
right.
it's difficult collectively for, all of us.
Right. And so, I think just being able to be a clinician in a way of being able to see them as more than, the symptoms of like an uphill healthcare, if you will, of, where are you living? How are you getting to school? Are you eating? All these things that might seem so baseline to some people. Sorry, excuse me, Larry. And I think that's just really what's inspired me to want to go into nursing.
Exciting. Wow. Just listening to you talk, you have unpacked a lot there and matured so much. It makes me want to go to your classes with you because of my psych background and my just desire to help others. And I also feel like I really like how you said, like, how your validation coming from yourself versus just from others. Because honestly, as a 51-year-old, I still struggle with that a lot. Like and I think some of that's just from our world, from social media and all different things. Like we think we have to be pleasing to others versus being proud of ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. Nina, this has been a really great conversation. You have been a huge part of Robbie's Hope. I'm incredibly proud of you as a young person. And we're here, that Jason and I are so proud of you and just watching you and cheering you along the way. We're super grateful that what you've been able to contribute, other kids have been watching and gotten us partly to where we are today. So for that, we say thank you. We end every podcast with the same question. You don't have to overthink this. This can be whatever Nina likes today. Nina, what does the world need to hear right now?
I think that the world needs to hear right now, do one thing that makes you happy. It can be very little or very big. Just do one thing every day that makes you happy. If it's watching a funny show, if it's taking a walk, if it's playing with your dogs, if it's scrolling mindlessly on Instagram for 10 minutes, just do something that allows you to have a couple minutes for yourself. And also, I would say just give yourself some grace. That's my other biggest thing.
Yeah, the world can use a lot more grace. And I think grace for ourselves. That's something that I work on a lot.
Exactly. Yes.
Awesome.
Oh, me too. I was going to
Nina,
say,
thank
we're
you
in it
so
together,
much for
Kari.
being a guest today on Hopeful Conversations. To our listeners, remember to tune in next time. And until then, hold on. Pain ends.